It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group. Hey, we're back. Say hello and introduce yourselves, everybody, before we dig into our topic.
Hi, I'm Els Tahura.
Hey, I'm Chad Jetner.
Hello, I'm Peter Lawrence.
And I'm Kyle Bacher. And today we're going to talk about boundaries, dealing with assumptions, expectations, and all sorts of things, with the exception of like personal boundaries, like invading space. I think we know what those are. Like
we've put boundaries on our boundaries.
Yes.
Yes.
A handshake's fine. I don't need a hug.
Wait,
yeah.
Really quick though, is it? Because I've been getting way more fist bumps lately than handshakes. I think we've actually outlawed the handshake.
We're even past that. So
Yep.
we're not going to talk about those. Virtual fist bump, Chad. Yes. The handshake, that's just too long of contact. Too much can happen during that handshake.
But we're not
all
gonna
about
anyway.
pathogens.
Yeah. That's like the 5-second rule. You know, hey, if food's only on the floor for 5 seconds, it's still good. That is not a thing. That is not real. Okay. So
I feel like we've gotten off track here, Kyle, a bit.
I mean, I think this is a record.
this is, we have to first establish the boundaries for staying on topic. So yes. All right. So professional boundaries within a team, within a company, at a customer, if you're a contractor or consultant, how much can they ask of you? How much do you give them?
How much
And then
can they ask?
within that work day, how do you set boundaries on things like your working time, you know, being productive, reasonable deadlines, stuff like that, taking PTO or sick days, mental health days. It's all wrapped up in that, under that boundaries umbrella, maintaining balance. So Peter,
Yes,
do you have boundaries?
I have boundaries. I try to limit my. I was thinking about this today, and I'm like, well, you know, if I work just like 10 minutes over, that's okay, right? Because that, but is it technically really? No, not really. But as a consultant, I've always sort of thought in the back of my mind, I will wash your car if you ask me to. If you're my boss and you say, go wash my car, I'll be like, sure, I can do that. The pay's the same, right? It's hourly. I won't be taking PTO to go wash your car, but I'll go wash your car, sure. Like if that's how you want to spend your consultant dollars, okay, we'll probably have a discussion. I'll probably mention it to my team, but
that's a boundary. Like you're taking that on. But do you think it's fair? Do you think it's fair? Do you think it's good or right?
No.
For you to go to work
it's not a fair question.
To do
and
something.
As a full-time employee, I would never go wash a car.
Would you pick up my
that's
dry
interesting.
cleaning? Would you buy a gift for my wife?
Not as a full-time employee, no. Those are things that are outside my employee agreement or whatever. But as a consultant, I feel like I'm more of an hourly. If you want to throw away your money, instead of paying someone $10 an hour to go somewhere and you want to pay my rate to have me go wash your car, okay. It's a poor decision and we'll talk about it, but
if you want me to wash your car, you will be throwing away your money. Because I don't know the difference between wash and just rinse.
well, you
I
run
will
it
not
through,
scrub.
you pick the basic wash, and you say, good enough. All right.
That's
no,
a boundary.
As a full-time employee, there's no, I wouldn't even entertain the conversation.
Those
I'd
are
be like, no.
It seems like a boundary like that is something that should be globally understood. That, like, if you have somebody that's working for you, it doesn't mean that like you should give them tasks wildly outside their job role, job description, purpose.
Well, it doesn't seem like you should, but I think what Peter's saying is that he would if you asked. And I think
Right.
Al had a very different answer to that when we talked about this earlier this week, right? Like, I'm at the point in my career where my boundaries, I'm not going to wear a pager. I'm absolutely not going to wash your car for you. I'm much more opinionated than Peter is about, what you can and can't expect from me if I'm, billing on a project at a specific customer, right? Like, yes, I will write software for you. I will be a tech lead, a software developer, a whatever, but I'm not your off-hour support, right? Like that's,
No.
I
Nope.
kind of set that. I'm not going to be on, your on-call rotation. That's, I'm a little too old for that. And there's probably a handful of other things that I wouldn't do. And I don't know, Elle, if you've got a different take on that, but it seemed like that was a pretty clear boundary for both of us earlier this week.
Yeah. And I could kind of take this in so many different directions, but looking specifically at like an on-call rotation, that's something that, I mean, I've learned that is, whether or not you're up for doing that and having that boundary is something that is much better set up early rather than I'll just wait for them to ask me to do on call so that I can say no.
I'll wait to be on the schedule.
Exactly. Yeah. At that point, yeah, you've got other conversations to have, but that's one of the things that it was one of the things that has drawn me to consulting. Yes, it comes with a lot more variety and you're basically having to onboard at a new company every couple months or so. And so there's stress with that. But the flip side is then I have a little more agency to say, okay, you're bringing me in to do this work. Let's talk about what that work is. And I am in a position to say, I can help you with this, but I'm not going to help you with this because either that's not my specialty. That's not what I'm looking to do. That's not where I can be most effective. Yeah. And so having those boundaries, I think is really helpful for each of us. The other thing that I try to keep in mind, because oftentimes I am at clients by myself, I'm not sent out with a team of other people. So I also try to keep in the back of my head that it's important for me to set boundaries because if a client wants to push my boundaries, they are going to steamroll over potentially their current employees' boundaries. So it's also helpful to think about, okay, is my really taking a step back and thinking, is this work I should be doing? Is that going to start a pattern that unintentionally forces other team members into that pattern as well?
Yeah,
that's a great point.
I've been a consultant and I've been a full-time employee that has brought in consultants. And it would seem like, if they're willing to treat me like this, what would they do to their own employees? And a lot of times it's the exact opposite. It's these are consultants. We're paying them for them so we can do what we want with them. And I was in a room with some management talking about our deadline and how long things would take. And the conversation went, well, if we have our consultants work 60-hour weeks for the next 8 weeks, we should be fine.
Easy.
And I said, well, this is the perfect example of the phrase, it looks good on paper. Has anyone asked the consultants if they're willing to do that? And there was this weird look like, why would we have to just like, no, they're people, there's expectations, unless that was all hashed out up front. There's certain boundaries that exist just because of what we're used to, and tacit boundaries, like a 40-hour Monday through Friday work week, unless otherwise specified, and a
Right.
general, somewhere between, 8 to 4, 9 to 5, like that area of the day.
I like to call
Anything
those core
outside
hours.
that, yeah,
What
anything
are the
outside that
core hours?
is, to me, needs to be discussed and figured out.
Yeah, because a lot of that also brings up the question with, okay, if we just have our consultants do 60-hour weeks for 2 weeks, then we'll be fine. That can very easily turn into, we're just going to have our consultants do 60-hour weeks indefinitely.
Mhm.
Yes.
And especially from the perspective of consultants, we are not there to be at the client forever. And so it's not a good idea to have your consultants on maintenance duties, because you want to be able to have full-time employees who can take on those responsibilities, so that, we don't have to keep paying a consultant for 6 years.
Training them in on the new system or on the different system every time we get a new consultant to come in.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I think in looking at that, 60-hour work week, if you're a salaried employee, salary is like, this is all you get for the year, but
Yep.
it's not tied to an hourly rate.
Yes.
This is your yearly salary, so your week might be 40 hours, it might be 45. But if you're working 60, they will let you.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
there even may be a culture where that is assumed, expected. Everybody else is doing it. Like, hey, I didn't see you on Saturday. It's like, that's because I don't work Saturdays. But sometimes when you're younger, starting out in your career, you want to make a good impression. You might be a people pleaser. You might be
You want to be the hero.
feeling like you have to.
Yep.
And it gives your employer the wrong idea of what it takes to do your job. Like, you hired me to do a job that is a person and a half job. So I'm working 60 hours a week every week just to get my work done. Anything on top of that is going to kill me. It's killing me now. Yeah, and you might not have to be doing that.
You shouldn't be. I mean, you're
Yeah.
going to burn out.
We've talked
Right.
about burnout, and
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
60-hour work weeks is a huge contributing factor.
But sometimes, things happen. Like, sometimes at work you need to step up and do a little bit more than you normally would.
And that is so loaded. That
And
phrase right there,
sometimes,
loaded.
yeah, sometimes there's pushing that happens. Sometimes you take on more. You choose to. Like, what would have happened if you had said no, push back, I can only work 40? If you had set those hard boundaries, like, what would that have meant? Would you
So
have known? Because it didn't happen.
Here's what we do. Like at the start of a project, one thing that we like to do is establish team norms, right? And one of our
Right.
that's where we kind of set a lot of these parameters. And for us, one of the most basic ones that we put out there is core hours, right? And it's not 8 to 4, it's not whatever. It's we're expecting you to be online from 9 to 3, right? You work around that. If you're doing 40 hours, it's 9 to 5. If you want to do 7, whatever, right? But everybody's
Right.
expected to have a presence online, especially remote, right? Like 9 to 3. And this is, we kind of bend it if we pull in offshore resources, but
Sure.
general guidance is still kind of the same, right? Like if we're working on an incredibly difficult problem that we know, downstream somebody's going to have questions on, you're expected to be online from 9 to 3. I don't know that I've ever come across somebody saying you got to work 60 hours. I probably wouldn't. But a lot of these boundaries you can set up front, and if hopefully get buy-in with everybody to say this is exactly what you can expect out of us. Um, and to the point of like the 60-hour thing, like I try really, really hard to make it understood that, you know, it's the 9 women can't make a baby in a month, right? Like you
Right.
can't keep adding resources or time to a project and expect a faster result. So that, you know, I've had to have that conversation quite a bit, and it
And
serves
I will
purpose.
say, as a consultant, I've had that conversation up front a million times more than I've ever had as a
Yes.
full-time employee. As a full-time employee, you just kind of bebop in there and you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm going to work probably 40 hours. I got some core hours. Great. This is what you guys do. Tell me about it. As a consultant, I'd be like, all right, am I limited to 40 because that's what you're going to expect? Is it flexible? Can I flex that 40 between different weeks? Is it expected that it's 42 every week or something weird like that? And yeah, you just have to. I always have those conversations as a consultant more than I ever did as a full-time employee because I just never thought about it.
And one of the things that I have to be cognizant of is like setting up that expectation. And, you know, I'm lucky enough to be placed somewhere where they don't mind if you go over, really not a big deal. But like you kind of set different bars for different folks when, you know, if one person is doing this and then, you know, I don't want to make a caricature out of the situation, but I don't,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
you could set the expectation that, oh, if Chad is doing this, well, then we can probably just ask other folks to do it. I don't think that would be a thing, but I also don't want to like, I don't want to put myself that far in front of everybody else and make it seem like, you know, I'm heroic or anything. I'm not. I'm just actually a little slower than the next guy, and I need a couple extra hours. So, yeah.
I found that it's as a consultant, it was far more frequent that the 40 was capped. Like we have a budget
Yep.
for this long, so it's going to be 40 hours. And we don't want you to go over that.
And we've talked in the past about having that cap and then having that cap blown off as the deadline approaches and they say, all right,
Yes.
now run. Forget this crawling stuff. Run fast. Do us 60 hours, whatever you can give us, we'll take.
Yep.
Yeah. And I look at everything like it's my choice, like it's voluntary. You know, showing up to work is voluntary. Now I might lose my job,
Goes.
but I drive the car named Kyle. No one else is driving this thing but me. And I work here voluntarily. Everything I do is voluntarily. I want to work here.
So
Like,
Kyle, speaking of working here in your role as the IT department, do you feel like your boundaries have shifted a bit?
you know, I want to do it. I mean, there's been times it's been really hard, and there's times I did more than I should have, and at personal expense because I'm a people pleaser and I like to.
Right.
I like when I get to kick it in high gear and make people happy. So I'm not really good at setting boundaries. But I wouldn't change anything. Um, but it's like all of that was, you know, the person that puts the most pressure on me to go outside of my boundaries is me. I do
Well, because you're
things
driving the Kyle car.
exactly, but I try to do things as quickly as possible and turn around things as quickly as possible. Part of that is it's fun when people can get really fast tech support, like when you can wow people. But also it prevents a lot of stuff from building up.
Right.
There's a lot of little things that can really pile up if you don't just knock them out of the way. And I don't like to have that much up in the air just because I don't want to take 15 minutes of unexpected time to do something quick for somebody.
That isn't a slippery slope. I don't know what is.
Exactly. But if I have to cry uncle, I will.
Yeah.
And I have before. And there's like, I'm okay with missing a deadline. I know I promised this to this person, but it's not done yet because these other things came up and kicked it down the road. And that thing that you need me to do for you is not an emergency.
Right.
You know, it's going to save you 2 hours a year. I think we can, we
Live
can
with it.
suffer with how we're doing it now a few more times. Yeah, so it's difficult. I've had times where, like, if I don't do it, if I don't spend the extra time, if I don't make a little bit of a sacrifice, then it's going to be a much bigger problem for somebody else.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'll take the hit. I'll take the small hit to save someone else from taking the big hit on stuff. But still, boundaries, like, I'm not on call 24/7. Like, after 5 o'clock, there's a good chance that you cannot find me. I'm off the grid.
You wouldn't answer your phone if your boss called you?
Many times I forgot to turn the ringer back on because I turned it off for the podcast.
There you go. We're saving you
Sometimes,
with
There
this
you go, yeah.
podcast.
yeah. Sometimes I look at it and I go, you know what? You can wait. And I won't tell you who it is that's calling me that can wait, but
We're not
Aw.
asking for names here.
yeah.
I mean, he's not asking for names, but
There's some people I will answer the phone because they've been really good to me and I appreciate them. So it's like, I'm not doing anything like, I'm just watching Netflix. It's not a big deal for me to pick up and say, what do you want?
but I
Do
think
you know what day it is?
that's a key thing, though. No, part of the reason why it's helpful to establish boundaries up front is then as you start to build trust with other people, then you are in a better position to say, okay, no, this is an exception, we need to deal with it, as opposed to, no, I told you back then, no, this is not this is not going to fly.
Yeah, I think there's if you set boundaries and then you break them or you don't enforce them, then people don't take your boundaries seriously.
You're just moving them then.
Then it's
So
it's no longer a boundary. So
Yeah.
we can call you now on weeknights and weekends and whatnot.
Well, that's why it's important to establish those as a team and then
Yeah.
have the team buy into what they are, right? Because if
100%.
one person is always going to be, doing something
Out
outside of
washing cars.
what team, yeah, right? Like if Peter's out there washing the boss's Corvette, well, then if that boss is going to ask whoever else. But like that's a silly example, but it kind of
No, but
true for other things.
it reminds me of one that I think is maybe something that you guys could maybe relate to a little more is I've seen teams where there is an agreement about, we have heads down coding time, and that's do not disturb. And there have been developers where, oh yeah, just keep bugging me if you got questions. And so it turns into, well, they said that I could bug them when I couldn't find this documentation that I need to read by next month.
Right.
And I had to
Yeah.
bother them during their heads down time.
Yeah, we actually have that expectation. Like we try to maintain Fridays as our meeting free day, right? Otherwise we get pulled into so much whatever.
That's
And the minute
glorious.
one, like we had this, right? Like somebody snuck one in
Yep.
and then there was another, and it's just like Katamari to Kai,
Respect the
right?
tea.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're right, Al. The minute one of them, the minute you break it, like it just becomes a new norm, and it's harder to reset from that point than it is.
Hard to claw that back, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's almost, if you're the one breaking it and the team decided to establish it because it was important, and it's important that we have working time. And so we're going to have that structure time where we're not available because we're working. And then you got one team member that's like telling people to break that rule. You can call me. You'll still fine. It's kind of diminishing that to the rest for the rest of it. It's like, well, I guess that wasn't that important a thing that these guys fought for when they set this rule. It's like, so you're kind of disrespecting the team by doing that.
Mhm.
How do you reach out to that person and say, you know, I appreciate your desire to help everyone at all times, but we've made this rule for a reason, and we need you to respect that rule, right? Is that just take them to the side and have that conversation? Is it bring it up and stand
Say,
up
yeah.
that some people aren't respecting the work time?
Yeah,
You
I'm
say,
a huge fan.
Kyle, you're killing me, Smalls.
Chad, you were going to say?
I'm
Oh,
a
sorry.
huge fan of public flogging.
The wall of shame.
I honestly, for us, I just kind of, I don't, it's not, I bring it up in stand-ups. That's where I bring it up. Like, hey, just a reminder, right? Like if something happens, we're Minnesotan, right? So we're super passive aggressive.
You don't stare directly at the person as you're saying it to the entire team.
Right, exactly.
If you were in person.
I was planning on being productive this Friday, but it looks like someone has put some meetings on my calendar. So
Could that be? I wonder. Yeah.
That is not, like that. It's actually pretty close, Al. Almost, almost on the nose for how I handle some of those situations.
I mean, I don't feel like it's wrong to have a conversation to the side, especially if you're either like at a parallel position with them or, slightly up or down, just because there's less of a, hey, let's figure out the power imbalance here. But I that's another reason why retros are great. If you have a space where the team has a chance to give feedback and potentially give feedback anonymously or framed within the context of team productivity as opposed to making it super personal.
Man, do I wish I had a confidential retro at one point ever in the last 5 years. They've all been like, all right. And Peter says this.
Yeah, or even better in ours, like our guy will say, who wrote that? And then there's just awkward silence for a while.
Why are you asking that question?
Yeah.
You're
I have a
breaking my
hard
boundary.
time with anonymous feedback because I have a style, I have a way of saying things, and I'm like, they're gonna figure out who said this. Like, I'm gonna have to just make this as like plain and robotic, and yeah, because we do anonymous surveys and things like that. I'm like, well, I want to fill this with jokes, which is going to be the first giveaway.
Right.
Oh, this one's trying to be funny. I wonder who that could be.
I wonder which of the 7 people that try to be funny are.
I think back to boundaries. Like, I like the idea of deliberately setting team boundaries.
Yeah.
I like the idea of working within other people's boundaries, like respecting other people's boundaries to help them respect yours. Like, if you're not going to respect their boundaries, are they going to respect your boundaries?
And it's far better to do it first and at the start than it is to ever change it anytime down the road.
And it varies depending on role too, right? Like for Peter, Elle, and I, if you're in a thing, right? Like if you're in a lead role, right? Like my boundaries are a little less defined than like an actual like heads down developer. You know, we try to like to Elle's point, we try to give them as much heads down time as possible. And everybody understands that when they don't have that, you guys don't get code, which is kind of the point, right? So
it's hard to code in meetings.
Yeah, so boundaries are very specific to your role on a project or on a team, and then don't like. I'm very cognizant of when I'm bothering, somebody and how I'm doing it, right? Like ollie oxen free when it comes to code reviews, right? Like we all expect to get a lot of feedback there, but other stuff, I try to stick to stand-ups. Retros are a great way to address a lot of this stuff. And yeah.
What about expectations like how people are treating you? Like, do you have boundaries? Like, is there any time where you'd say, when you provide feedback to me like that, with all that sarcasm in front of everybody, like it hurts my feelings.
Wouldn't it have been great if Kyle would have gotten this thing done this spring? I guess we'll have to wait.
Well, we're
till
all
next
here.
spring.
We're all still here because somebody. Yeah. I don't know. It's some of those are like, just the boundaries of human decency and how you should treat people. And so I don't think you need to like establish them. But I'm wondering,
you feel like you shouldn't have to go in and say, I would like to be treated as a
Right.
human rather than as some sort of robot that you yell at every week.
But some cultures, some places you find yourself walking into can be pretty abrasive.
Oh yeah, we've talked about the different badges and how some badges are
Yeah.
employee and some badges are not, right? And that's to make it easier to identify you so that you can get flogged more often, perhaps.
What about like saying no when someone's like trying to get you to do their work, or people that are not assigned to give you like work direction are asking you to do things?
I found stand-up is a good place to bring that out, right? Like, I won't be working on this story right now because I've been asked to do this other thing. And if somebody in that room says, oh, that's not what we should be doing right now, and and the boss hears that or the product owner hears that, they can go and fix that problem for me without me having to, do too much pushback on it myself.
Yeah, we need you to spend a month helping our rollout team convert these things user by user.
Absolutely. Let me go talk to my project manager and we'll get that time freed up.
Right. However, the deadline's not going to change. Our expectation of what you can accomplish in that time is not going to change. Yeah, I've had a few different occasions where team members, there was a finite set of hours, and then a team member takes work direction from somebody that is not the lead.
Lot. Yep.
They go off into their own fantasy land of requirements and features and options. And all of a sudden, I have 5 hours left to do 20 hours worth of work.
And I will say Agile has helped quite a bit with that. You bring that in. It's got to be estimated by the group on the board. Everybody knows. Even a 2-person team, a 3-person team should have some sort of work area or display that shows what you're working on, and so that everybody can see, oh, this person's working on what? We're not doing that. We said no. I'm going to go talk to them now.
I've been on teams where other people have asked, like, well, why do you care what they're working on? You have your stuff, they have their stuff, and it's like, well, no, we're on the same team. Right. What they do does impact me because it impacts my workload. It impacts the potential training I need to do for other people. It impacts.
Why don't you care what they're working on?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I think though that there could be like some personal boundaries you could set to say, I'm going to stay in my lane and not worry too much about what everybody else is doing, get involved in stuff that's someone else's problem.
I'm not going to go help them. It's nice to know what they're working on, but I'm not going to go help them work on that. I'm going to work on my stuff.
I overheard you're doing it this way, and I think I have a better way.
Yeah. Like, let's get in a room with supervisors
Right.
or product owners or whoever to say, here's our giant pile of work.
Right.
Tell us in what order we should be tackling these things.
I think a lot of that too depends on, like, if you're on a team and you've got a lead and you've got a product owner and you've got all these relationships, like the maturity level of your team lead
Yes.
should hopefully be helping with a lot of that, right?
Yep.
Like,
Right.
like you kind of get ahead of that by organizing the backlog of work correctly, right? And that's, if I'm a developer on a project, I want to just see a backlog and I want to just take the top thing off of there and say,
Top
I'll
of the
be able to
to-do.
do that. And I know that it's probably, it's been vetted. We've thrown some points on it. We know how long this work is. And we know that, like, priority wise, I'm working on the right thing.
Right.
And so, I don't necessarily need to worry about boundaries there, right? Because I trust my product owner. I trust my team lead. I trust that they've all done their work. And I don't have to go outside of my lane to get that, right.
But when you aren't on a team like that, and I've certainly had postings like this where you are basically working solo. Like, technically you're on a team, but you're by yourself and you're getting requests via a ticketing service and through email and through phone and through text message and Slack message.
Yeah.
Like, then there's a lot more work up front that you have to do to just say, okay, I'm going to make a board for myself, or I'm
Right.
going to have a meeting with my supervisor once a week to say, let's pick the top things that I'm going to work on this week, so that then you have a consistent response to everyone yelling at you to
Right.
say, cool, you are 20th in line. I will let you know, or just make a ticket, put it on the board.
Right. And back to your point, Kyle, where you were talking about being asked to go way outside of your comfort zone or something like that, to go work on a project for a long duration. As a consultant, I find that is the perfect opportunity to introduce them to the account exec for the account and say, you should have this conversation with, so-and-so, because they would love to have that conversation, and see if we have someone available on the bench that can do that project for you. And if you're trying to cheat the system, sneak some things in there, that'll wash right out quickly, right? And if you're not, excellent. That's an opportunity for someone else who actually does that work.
Yeah. I've been pulled into, like, from SharePoint consulting to build a system that does blah blah and this, and then I'm troubleshooting someone's PC. Like,
I keep getting the blue screen when I run Word on this one document. Like, and that's SharePoint's problem. How?
Actually, that was a real thing that happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I was sitting in a meeting room and the guy's like, I can't get my laptop to connect to the internet. I'm like, and he handed it to me and I'm like, this is a Windows box. I don't even know what this is, dude. Like, I just handed it right back to him. And I said, good luck, man. I don't even know where to click. It's all you.
So you need to have two laptops and quickly swap them for the opposite of whatever you're about to be handed. Like, oh no, that's a Mac. I don't do Mac. Sorry. Or oh, that's a Windows PC. I don't understand that. I only do Macs.
It was really like that. He's like, yeah, I can't get on. I'm like, man, that sucks.
Yeah.
Have you tried
Chad
turning it
carries,
off and on again? All right.
He carries
that's
a
my
bag
Windows
with
experience.
a few extra Macs in it, and he says, "Oh, I can fix that for you." He hands him a Mac. This should solve your Windows problems.
That's right.
So, do you establish personal boundaries for how you're going to operate?
What?
I try always.
Do you really?
Like, I'm not going to get involved in politics, or I'm not going to get.
You'll never
involved.
see me spin on my heel
take on
faster.
other people's bad days and problems and that kind of stuff.
So
I'm
curious, Peter, because
Yeah.
like you said, you'll never see me spin my heels faster than if somebody's trying to get me involved in politics.
Politics or religion, I'm out of there. Woo!
But-
I'm so busy. I hear my mom calling.
Does that include like work politics or like
Yep.
relationship dynamics?
As much as possible, yes. If I'm not gonna. I've certainly had, parking lot conversations with people trying to talk them off the ledge, or whatever you want to call it, is sort of like, I see you're upset. Let's, as a team lead in the situation, it's like, okay, what can I do from a consultant team lead standpoint to help make the situation better? I'm not going to bring your cat back. I'm not going to do anything like that. But so yes, that's one of my limits, Chad. Is I may wash a car or two, but not that it's never happened. I've always said I would, but I've never been offered.
Peter, these are fascinating boundaries. Like, I'm actually,
but I've certainly, had lots of conversations, especially with people that were upset about how the project was going, or that weren't getting their way about something. And it's like, okay, well, let's have that conversation. Let's talk about it. Let's see if we can, maybe we can push your boundary a little bit towards my boundary, and I'm willing to let that go. Or maybe we can, shove that work a little bit to the right onto somebody else's plate, or try to work those things out without having to have some sort of HR conversation that nobody wants to have.
Yeah. I'm sorry. You go ahead, Al.
I was gonna say I kind of think of it like having good boundaries is a harm reduction. If someone is having a really hard time with a situation at work, like they didn't get the project they wanted, or somebody isn't writing their code the way this person seems to think it should be written.
Using 6 spaces. It's horrible.
But tabs versus spaces. I Peter, I'm like you were. Yeah, I'll listen to it, and I can offer kind of an outsider perspective.
Right.
But I don't get involved in it. I don't pick a side, because if I do that, then now I'm in the middle of this. So now I'm stressed, which will reduce my quality of output. I'm encouraging that other person to keep being angry. And so they're not making progress. It's just like it does so much more harm or risks doing so much more harm to not have boundaries.
And that's a good consulting lesson, right? Like, do not take sides in a workplace.
You're always going to lose.
You'll always lose. Absolutely. You're a
overhead,
good listener.
Just the overhead of drama and work politics.
Yep.
And like, you can kill like half of your week just dealing with stuff and sending, a flurry of text back and forth and
never
dealing with situations. Some stuff, you should still have empathy. Some things are going to impact the project that should be concerning, that you need to be aware of. But I like to take the electrician or plumber perspective when I go in a place. I'm there to fix the pipes. I'm there to do this job. I did let your dog out because they were scratching at the door and you weren't around, and I didn't want them to go on the rug, but that was an extra. Like, I'm gonna come in here and do my job. And if I'm an electrician and you ask me to fix the pipes, then I'm going to call my company and say, hey, do we got a plumber we can get out here?
Right.
But I'm not going to fix your family. I'm not going to, yeah.
It does get trickier depending on your role, though, right? Because if you're the plumber and you're only in there to do a specific thing, it's one thing. But the other side of it, like if you come in as not the plumber for the house, but the architect of the house, right, which is an actual role that we fulfill sometimes, you do actually have to get involved with a little bit of that stuff, and it's hard to separate it out because, you walk into a large organization and they've got 10 different ways to solve a problem, and they've got, a handful of opinions, and some of the guys are, more influential about what direction you should take for a given solution. And some people, aren't always the most reasonable and, don't really care about whether it's the best fit. They just want their solution, carried forward.
We've always done it that way, is my favorite phrase, to be like, why? Why have
Or-
we always done it that way?
Or we've
Because I
got
say
this,
so.
yeah, or we've got this new direction that we're going with this stuff. We just need a pilot project. Would you guys want to jump on board? And that's equally as terrifying as we've always done it this way. So it's on the one hand, I see what you guys are saying, but like on the other hand, I mean, depending on where you land within a project hierarchy, it would be wonderful to not be involved in some of those things. But
Yes,
Yeah,
and we
and I
all
think. No, go ahead, Peter.
we all build our consulting chops over time and mistakes, right? So, just because we're saying these things now doesn't mean that we've always done it that way, right?
Yeah.
I haven't always been, able to say no to, a little extra work from the president or the CEO, but I certainly have gotten more experience to say, well, I've made my project a week behind by doing this thing that the CEO didn't care about, but just came out of his office after reading an article and thought it looked cool. And so, yeah, like that was a waste of a week. Why would I do that? And so, yeah, I learned a valuable lesson. Like that did not help.
It totally requires also thinking about, okay, when are my boundaries going to be disruptive to other people? Because Chad, I was going to ask you, because one thing we haven't talked about yet is taking time off. And Chad's looking around like, what is this thing that
you guys do that?
And so, I happen to know, Chad, that you are taking some time off coming up, but presumably that comes with, if you're going to say my phone is not accessible, client, while I'm out, there's a fair bit of prep work that you need to do to help them feel comfortable with you having that boundary.
I mean, I'm super fortunate. I have so there's me and another individual are co-leads on a project. So it's a little bit easier for me to say, talk to this guy. However, my wife has already told me, hey, we're going to go to Hawaii. I know you're going to bring your work laptop. You can, she's given me permission to check in on work while she gets ready in the morning, which is a significant process. So I've got about an hour window in the morning where I can just because she knows, and this is where I'm not good, Peter, at setting these boundaries. She knows it would actually be a more stressful vacation for me to not check and to just let it go for 10 days.
Yeah.
Sure.
Than if I just kind of like popped in for a brief hour in the morning, kept abreast of whatever's going on, and then like left it, right? So for me, I mean, if I'm gone for, if I'm taking a 3-day weekend, no, I'm leaving the laptop at home. But I'm going to be gone for, I think we've bumped it up to 12 days now.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
no, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
And she knows that it will be like the way I work is, yeah, well, she'll allow me, she'll permit me to check Monday through Friday in the morning.
Which I think ties in well to just the idea of like boundaries can be different from person to person. And sometimes there is a negotiation. Like you're going into a role with the understanding like, yep, I may have to get into some political fun because the product that I'm trying to put forward includes, more efficient team production or, something like that. So
3 different teams have to agree on something and it's for my project. So I get to wrangle 3 different opinions.
There's a cultural component to the project. There's a people component. And so that some of that comes with that. It's just natural. It's going to be part of it. So do you have like specific work-life balance things you keep in mind to protect your time? Like, you the best. So Chad, you in that you can't take 12 days away from your vacation or from your project on vacation without checking in every day. Otherwise you will be a nervous wreck the whole time, and that's not going to be a vacation.
Right.
I have a hard time working more than 40 hours a week. I'm not effective after that magic 40. And some would even question the time after 30.
The magic 10.
I don't troubleshoot in the afternoon. Sorry. Because that's when I break stuff. No, but you have that, you kind of have the pulse on yourself to know like when you can give, when you can't, when you can step up. Like what about meetings that are inefficient and like too frequent and it frustrates you so much. Like you're not setting the meetings, you have to be there, but you get so frustrated that it's killing you. Is that a boundary where you say, is there any way that we could make these a half hour?
Yes.
Yep.
I have definitely learned to be like, okay, we're going to work the amount of work that it takes to do this. We're not going to work to the time that we set on the calendar. And if you want to talk about something else for that time, great. But let's put a different meeting on the calendar. Or let's not have a standing 2-hour meeting just because you really want people in the room for 2 hours to talk about the project and anything that might relate to the project ever. Like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to have specific tasks. We're going to be smart about our time. And if you're going to invite me to a boring meeting that I don't contribute and I don't listen to, I'm going to stop attending. I'm going to find other higher priority things that somehow get me out of this meeting. And slowly I will, is it the Irish goodbye? I forget who like disappears from parties
That's
without.
me. That's
knowing.
It's the Kyle goodbye.
Kyle goodbye.
Let's see.
So,
There's 60 people here. I'm not going to go say goodbye to everybody. I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to vanish.
Yep.
Declining a meeting, like, do you just decline? Like, do you just no explanation?
tentative.
That is so passive aggressive. Peter.
Wow.
Darn right.
Yeah.
We've actually done the other. So as far as that goes, we set up the expectation ahead of time. Like our sprint planning meetings are going to be like 2 hours and it's going to be super long. We're going to get super pedantic about a lot of details.
Yep.
Lock that off. Our stand-up meetings are going to be super short. They're going to be, if we can, like our goal is 5 minutes, right? If you
Right.
can't get out, in and out in 5 minutes, whatever. But like we try to set expectations around what those things are going to be. And we try to set boundaries for, what goes into a stand-up meeting, right? And what doesn't,
Right.
and it's different.
I'm not saying a meeting can't be 2 hours. I'm just saying that it had better cover 2 hours of
Yeah, no, I
things
totally get you.
for
Yeah.
that meeting.
Yeah. There's got to be a directed,
Right.
conversation about.
You guys aren't talking about stand up in your 2 hour meeting. You're talking about the future
right.
of tasks and things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think it almost ever hurts to just kind of call attention to like, well, it feels like we're off topic or it feels like we've been going around in circles. Let's
Those are good ways to put
be
it.
done for now. Or like let's
I've had
come
to
back
say,
to this.
I've had to say, we've had this meeting 5 times.
Yeah. Yeah, or just like
and
trying
not-
to come
yeah.
back to the action items. Like, okay, if we
Right.
needed to meet, we needed to talk through this. Tell me what our decisions are and what the
Right.
next steps are.
What
Yeah.
our choices are even. Let's get
Yeah.
a set number of choices that we can pick.
And
maybe
Well,
think
let's
about
circle
it.
back. Let's circle back on this, and we'll throw something on the calendar, and have this same meeting again next week, and we won't make any decisions. It's like at a
Nope.
certain point, it's like, okay, we have to decide. We have to move forward.
yeah, and if
But
we have an hour
yeah.
meeting, but we don't have an hour's worth of time, we don't need to spend an hour.
And I think
Right.
like it's perfectly reasonable to set boundaries for a meeting. Pull
Totally.
Kyle aside ahead of time and go, all right, no stories, no jokes. we don't have a lot of time. We got a lot of stuff to go through. So
That's right.
you need to dial back the entertainment and let us just have this meeting. And I'm like, fine. Okay.
All right.
All right. Let's stick with the boundary of our time today and say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
So long, folks.
Goodbye. Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.